Hi, I'm Donna from EDLAB, and today I'm joined by Professor van der Vleuten. He's Professor of Education at FHML, and he's widely regarded as Maastricht University's foremost expert in evaluation and assessment. Welcome, Cees.
Thank you, Donna.
So the vision on assessment, it really focuses on creating meaningful assessment. So that means assessment that really stimulates the right kind of learning behavior and long-term development for our students. So, like learning, assessment should be constructive, collaborative, contextual, and self-directed. And in order to achieve that, we need our degree programs to provide greater opportunities for our students to reflect on and to learn from feedback with the guidance and support and coaching from our staff. This also needs coordination at a program level. So one way of implementing or achieving that is by using what we know as programmatic assessment. So I would like to ask you, would you be able to describe briefly what we mean by programmatic assessment?
Programmatic assessment is a view on assessment which really matches the vision on assessment as well, but it rests on a set of principles, and then it becomes a concrete model of assessment. Let me give you a couple of those principles. One principle is that any assessment activity is considered to be only a data point, right? And a data point is not suited for decision making, and I can prove that scientifically if you wish. But a data point should be targeted to giving information on the learning. So should be as formative as possible, should feed into the learning process, should give the learner meaningful feedback. That's one rule. The second rule, so no passing or failing on any single data point. Then the learner will assemble those data points, and that will promote the learning process itself. Naturally, somewhere in time, decisions need to be taken. And the data points that are accumulated are at a certain point in time assessed, usually by an external panel of assessors. So basically what happens is that the data gathering and assessment, the ongoing gathering of learning information, is separated from the decision-making of assessment. And commonly, we mix those things completely up. Any assessment activity usually has a grade or another pass-fail decision. We don't do that in programmatic assessment. So all data points are meant for learning, and then they aggregate into a final decision. In order to help the students, we also coach them because we know we want them to be reflective, we want them to be self-directed, as you said, but from the many, many years of experience, I know that self-direction requires quite a lot of direction. And we provide that by giving learners a coach or a mentor. And the mentor has access to the data points. And there are regular meetings between learner and coach. And then the progress is being discussed, right? And oftentimes these contexts, these meetings, are prepared by the learner by making self-assessments based on the data. This progresses. And then, before a very high-stake decision is being taken, there's an intermediate decision. So the learner knows what areas of improvement need to be addressed. And then at the end, there's a panel of assessors really judging all the information in terms of a pass-fail, or in terms of a grade, or in terms of a distinction, whatever you wish. But that's a high-stakes decision. Now, one of the other principles that is really important in programmatic assessment is that the stakes of the decision defines or is related to the number of data points, right? If you have a high-stake decision, you need a lot of information. So you need a lot of data points, right? I always compare that to making a picture or interpreting a picture. If you have a single pixel, a single data point, you can't see the picture, right? But if you have many, many pixels, the picture emerges. And once you have clarity on the interpretation of the picture, then you can take high-stake decisions, right? In reality, in existing programs, such high-stake decisions are taken after a longer period of time, half a year, or some of our training programs, after a year. Intermediate decisions are given halfway through the year. So this is a total system of assessment that requires rethinking of the classical system of assessment, which is often a challenge for many people.
Yeah, and rethinking from the student perspective and the staff perspective, because their roles are quite different from what we would consider traditional assessment or grading, right?
The traditional role of the teacher is to pass or fail the learner. In programmatic assessment, it's not their role to pass or fail, but to provide information on the learning.
But they still need to be able to, so you talked about collecting data points. So the role of the staff is still to be able to interpret what that means, right? So do you think it's more subjective than traditional grading?
Yes, it's subjective, but the subjectiveness is counterbalanced by the number of data points, right? And by the fact that you will be assessed by many different people, right? So any form of subjectivity will be overcome by large sampling. And the high-stake decisions is also based on a set of procedures, which makes the decision-making quite robust.
Does that also mean that you wouldn't just have one coach, but you would have different coaches for different subjects or different courses that you were taking?
No. Usually the coach or the mentor follows you through, okay. Preferably even through your whole studies. And that person becomes a trusted person, right? Which is also quite good for student well-being, right? And so that coach is another teaching role.
And do you think this increases the workload for our teaching staff if we were to implement this method?
Well, important in programmatic assessment is quality of the feedback, which involves staff time. Coaching is important, which involves staff time. Naturally, if you have a training program with a lot of students, you probably have to cut a few corners, right? And that's what training programs do. So you can't always implement the full model, all depending on the circumstances and the resources. But first of all, it's a different way of thinking before you get into the intricacies of implementing it.
And this was, so a programmatic assessment has been mostly implemented in medical faculties, is that right? Or is it also being used around the world in other subject areas?
Around the world in other subject areas, and in the Netherlands, in many different subject areas. There's a Dutch network on programmatic assessment, Leernetwerk Programmatisch Toetsen, which is kind of a class of training programs that we have every year. So every year we have a new class. In the class of last year, we had 20 programs from different universities, different higher education programs. This year we have a class of 40. So it's progressing pretty fast.
And do you see from the examples worldwide that you're aware of that this is a suitable or valuable method for all types of students, or because there's a lot of responsibility on the side of the students?
Definitely.
Is it only effective for a certain type of student?
No. If I look at educational change, like programmatic assessment, I hardly ever worry about students. Because students are young, adaptive, they quickly get the hang of what they need to do. I worry much more about teachers and about their conceptions in terms of what is proper teaching and assessment. Because if you engage in programmatic assessment, you have to change your behavior, your teaching behaviors, which is not an easy thing. So often there's a lot of resistance, more from the teachers than from the students. The students get the hang of it, no problem whatsoever. Similar questions were also posed when we introduced problem-based learning, right? What do we do in Maastricht University? Everyone does problem-based learning. Does it work? Of course it works. So I don't worry about the students.
And what would you say to those staff who may be more critical about this method?
Go and see, because I think that teachers learn in the exact same way as students do. So experiential learning is also important for teachers. Go somewhere where they have introduced it. Convince yourself, or not.
And what about at program level? Because like you say, this is, it's not just about implementing this on a course-by-course level.
No.
You need that consistency
Yeah.
and the coordination across the program. So what for you would be the most important conditions for this sort of method to be successful within a degree
Yes.
program?
I think that's a very good question, because if you have a very modular program where typically education is based on outcomes or on competencies, forming the longitudinal lines in a curriculum, then it's logical to monitor students longitudinally as well and see how they develop. So in those modern education programs, programmatic assessment fits, right? And if you have a very traditional teacher-centered oriented program, don't even consider using programmatic assessment.
And why do you think more institutions aren't already implementing this method of assessment?
Well, I think many institutions are implementing programmatic assessment, and it's going really fast in professional universities. Our HBO, Hoger Beroepsonderwijs, they adopt it incredibly, and even have central facilities to implement programmatic assessment. So it's going really fast. My return question would be, how long has it taken before PBL became more common? It takes quite a long time. But I'm happy with the fact how it is distributing itself. So.
Okay, and do you, finally, the question that we get the most is, do you still see a role for grades? Because we live very much in a grading culture where students come through school and they want the highest grades, and then so they come to university and they're almost craving for grades because it helps them to access internships, the master's programs, things like that. So what about the overall grading culture?
I would like to replace that grading culture into a feedback culture. Learners want information on where they stand. That is not the same as giving a grade. Actually, if you give grades on complex skills, then grades are kind of meaningless. If you want to say something about the academic development of an individual learner and has done an activity, you give a grade, then that grade is not informative for how to change things. So grades, in my view, are not very productive.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why our vision on assessment here at really focuses on that meaningfulness, right? So it has to be about using assessment to promote learning and to move the learners forward.
So grades are meaningless, because they're not so informative for the learning itself.
And on that note, I would like to say thank you very much, Professor Cees van der Vleuten, and it's been very interesting talking to you today.
Thank you very much.